We are constantly fooled by the optics of dominance. We look at the man who bursts into the room, not just entering, but colonizing the space, his voice a hammer, his movements a statement. He doesn't just speak, he projects, ensuring every head turns, every conversation pauses. He seeks not respect but total attention, conflating visibility with victory and noise with genuine authority. Everyone notices him. Everyone remembers him. And in the modern theater of social dynamics, he walks away believing he has won the stage, convinced that his loud presence has established him as the undeniable center of gravity. Right? Wrong. Terribly, catastrophically wrong. The master strategist and ruthless observer of human nature, Niccolò Machiavelli, would not call this man a leader. He would not call him powerful. He would call him a fool. Not because he lacks raw physical courage, but because he lacks the intellectual courage to understand how true power operates, how it accrues, and how it is quietly wielded. The man who needs to be loud, the man who feels the uncontrollable urge to announce his own strength, is already revealing his gravest strategic vulnerability. He is broadcasting his fear. Machiavelli famously proposed that the first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. Here is the inherent self-destructive problem with adopting the performance of toughness. You do not attract strong, stable, or valuable allies. You attract precisely the opposite. You attract users who are looking for a shield. You attract sycophants who will amplify your ego while draining your resources. You attract enemies who view your loud display as an open challenge. And perhaps most dangerously, you attract astute observers, the real strategists, who are simply waiting for you to fall, calculating the precise angle of your descent. The loudest person in the room is rarely the most powerful. They are almost universally the most insecure, relying on volume to fill the cavernous emptiness where genuine confidence should reside. If you are compelled by the need to act tough, if you are constantly driven to prove your strength in every minor interaction, Machiavelli has a cold, sharp truth for you. True power hides its claws. Real strength, the kind that endures and commands respect across generations, moves in silence. The very moment you feel the desperate need to prove how strong you are, to stake your claim with aggression or intimidation, you have already lost the game, forfeiting the strategic high ground to your quieter, more calculating opponents. We see this tragic pattern playing out everywhere we look. Walk through any high-stakes environment, a modern office building, an exclusive gym, the complex architecture of online forums, and you will witness them. Men who have fundamentally confused volume with authority, aggression with decisive confidence, and clumsy intimidation with earned respect. They speak louder than is necessary for communication. They take up more psychological space than their accomplishments justify. They treat every conversation not as an exchange but as a competition, turning every interaction, no matter how trivial, into a test of dominance. They genuinely believe this performance is making them powerful. But Machiavelli insists that this is a colossal misreading of the human operating system. These loud, aggressive individuals are not projecting strength. They are advertising their profound insecurity. They are broadcasting their fear of being irrelevant. They are holding up an enormous neon sign that screams, "I desperately need you to believe I am strong, because internally, I lack the assurance of my own strength." And here is the strategic consequence they fail to grasp. Every person observing this aggressive display is making calculations. The smart ones are quietly cataloging their weakness, recognizing the fragility beneath the bluster. The truly dangerous ones are already planning how, when, and where to exploit it. The valuable, high-caliber individuals are simply walking away entirely, deeming the performance too exhausting, too unpredictable, and too low value for their time. Why does this happen? Machiavelli explains that it's embedded in the delicate, often contradictory layers of human nature. People do not respect loud confidence. They respect quiet, self-possessed competence. They do not fear obvious, predictable aggression. They fear unpredictable, measured intelligence. They do not follow the individual who petulantly demands leadership. They follow the person whose actions and consistent results effortlessly demonstrate it. This misunderstanding leads to the first catastrophic and often irreversible mistake. The tough guy escalates situations he cannot actually handle. He writes checks with his temper that his ability cannot cash. He starts wars, be they physical, professional, or social, that he cannot possibly win. Machiavelli lived by a fundamental rule. Never wage a war you cannot win. Yet the modern tough guy violates this principle constantly and disastrously. Driven by wounded ego and unchecked emotion, he gets aggressive with the wrong person at the wrong time, in the wrong place. He transforms minor, manageable disagreements into protracted, life-destroying conflicts. He turns small, solvable problems into colossal, reputation-shattering disasters. And when the hammer of reality finally strikes, it always hits with brutal force. Here is the truth that absolutely destroys most people who choose to act tough. You lose all control of the narrative and the outcome the moment you escalate. That instantaneous moment when you puff up your chest, when you needlessly raise your voice, when you take that aggressive step forward, you have effectively lit a fuse. The fatal flaw is that you have zero idea how long that fuse is, or, more terrifyingly, what devastating consequence it is connected to. A wise man does at once what a fool does last. Machiavelli understood this perfectly. The fool operates on impulse. He escalates first and only begrudgingly considers the consequences later, usually while dealing with the fallout. The wise man, however, considers every possible outcome, every countermove, and every potential cost before making a single, measured move. But the tough guy operates entirely on raw, unrefined emotion, never on cold, hard strategy. He feels disrespected at work and immediately jumps to confrontation. He is inconvenienced in traffic and initiates a full-blown road rage incident. He receives a challenge in a public setting and cannot back down without feeling that he has lost face, thereby chaining himself to an emotional reaction rather than a strategic decision. He fails to realize, until it is far too late, that every single escalation is a roll of the dice in which, statistically, he can only lose. The absolute best-case scenario is that nothing happens and he simply looks foolish and desperate to those watching. The worst case, however, is that he encounters someone who is genuinely dangerous, someone deeply connected, or someone vastly smarter and more strategic than he is. Because here is the dark truth about real predators, the ones who actually possess power. They don't act tough. They have no requirement to. They move quietly. They strike with surgical precision and they vanish before their victim even realizes what hit them. The person who truly has the resources, the connections, and the capability does not advertise it. They have no need to prove themselves in random, pointless encounters with strangers. They do not need to win every petty verbal sparring match. They are not compelled to be the loud, self-proclaimed alpha in every room they enter. And this is where acting tough becomes genuinely, existentially dangerous. By making yourself the loudest target, you invite retaliation from people who operate on an entirely different plane of existence. Individuals who think in terms of months, not seconds. The quiet colleague you just disrespect turns out to be unexpectedly connected to the senior leadership. The woman you were aggressively dismissive of turns out to possess significant financial or political influence. The employee you habitually bullied turns out to have been meticulously documenting everything for a formal case. Machiavelli termed this the fortune of fools. Temporary, fleeting success achieved through sheer ignorance and bluster, which inevitably leads to spectacular, career-ending failure. The tough guy might win a few small, noisy battles, but he ultimately loses wars that he never even realized he was fighting, let alone understood the rules of. And the tragedy is that everyone around him sees the downfall coming except for the man himself. Why? Because while he is intensely focused on the performance of looking strong, everyone else is strategically focused on the work of actually being strategic. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. This is the partial quote everyone knows, but it is far, far better to be profoundly underestimated than recklessly overestimated. Machiavelli makes it clear. Visibility equals vulnerability. The very instant everyone knows the full extent of your strength, they immediately begin planning around your known weaknesses. But the aggressive performer does the exact opposite. He makes himself the singular, most visible person in every situation. He ensures everyone notices his aggression, remembers his confrontations, and tracks his volatile movements. And when you become the fixed, obvious target, you attract the attention of individuals who view you simply as a problem to be strategically solved, not through direct confrontation, which is amateur hour, but through strategy, patience, documentation, and precision. The office tough guy suddenly finds himself the focus of relentless HR investigations. His aggressive, demanding emails are forwarded to management committees. His confrontational meetings are meticulously documented by multiple witnesses. His hostile, unpredictable behavior is cataloged and reported by a growing coalition of people he offended. Meanwhile, he genuinely thinks he is winning because people appear to defer to him in the moment. He does not realize that with every interaction, they are quietly, patiently building a watertight case against him. Machiavelli called this the blindness of the tyrant, the paralyzing inability to recognize that apparent submission almost always masks active resistance. That immediate, surface-level respect often hides genuine, festering contempt. That quick compliance almost always precedes long-term devastating revenge. And in the complex, interconnected modern world, this dynamic plays out in the most devastating ways imaginable. The gym tough guy who throws his weight around eventually encounters the quiet individual who trains professionally and fights with surgical intent. The workplace bully who pushes everyone to the brink eventually pushes the one person who has deep, unexpected connections to the upper echelons of management. The social media loudmouth who talks trash online eventually encounters the precise, calculating hacker or lawyer who can dox him, sue him into ruin, or systematically destroy his reputation. Because here is what the aggressive performer never considers. In a world governed by ubiquitous cameras, endless recordings, pervasive social media, and zero-tolerance legal consequences, every single aggressive act becomes unassailable evidence. Every threatening, unhinged statement becomes permanent, devastating documentation. Every intimidating behavior becomes ammunition, stockpiled by your enemies. And the critical point is this: everyone becomes your enemy when you unnecessarily make yourself a threat. Neutral bystanders instantly become hostile. Potential allies instantly become cautious. Even active opponents, people who might have gladly helped you, now actively work to neutralize your presence. This is what Machiavelli meant by making yourself odious. When your presence becomes a pervasive problem that others need to solve, when your behavior transforms into a threat that others feel compelled to neutralize, when your attitude becomes a challenge that others must meet, and the solution they choose is never what the tough guy expects. Here is the career-ending, relationship-shattering truth about acting tough. It destroys your hard-won credibility faster than almost anything else you can possibly do. Credibility is a fragile edifice built upon three pillars: predictability, reliability, and competence. But the tough guy is inherently emotional, chronically reactive, and fundamentally focused on short-term dominance rather than stable, consistent results. He is always more concerned with winning the interaction than achieving the core objective. Watch what happens in genuinely professional settings. The manager who attempts to lead through sustained intimidation instantly loses the functional respect of both his superiors and his subordinates. His bosses quickly see him as fundamentally unstable and therefore completely unpromotable. His employees see him as profoundly insecure and ultimately incompetent. Machiavelli insisted that leadership is about influence, not brute force. The best fortress which a prince can possess is the affection of the people. Yet, the aggressive individual operates from the opposite, disastrous philosophy: rule through projected fear and demand respect through aggressive performance. And this always backfires spectacularly in modern organizations. Fear-based leadership creates shallow surface compliance but generates devastating underground resistance. People will do exactly what you explicitly tell them and absolutely nothing more. They will follow orders, but they will never offer valuable ideas. They will obey, but they will never innovate. Meanwhile, your toxic reputation spreads like wildfire. The story of your explosive meeting becomes office legend. Your threatening email is screenshotted and shared across every department. Your aggressive behavior becomes the definitive example of exactly how not to conduct oneself. In any environment, professional reputation is everything. It is the invisible currency of power. It dictates who trusts you with important projects, who includes you in strategic discussions, and who is willing to work alongside you. It affects your promotions, your career opportunities, your entire trajectory. But the tough guy remains blind to this truth until the damage is irreversible. He genuinely wonders why he keeps getting passed over for promotions, despite his strong leadership style. He is confused about why smart, capable people seem to actively avoid him in important meetings. He fails to understand why his ideas, even when objectively good, are instantly dismissed. Because Machiavelli knew the secret about power in organizations. It flows naturally to those who can be reliably trusted with it. It does not go to those who angrily demand it. but to those who consistently demonstrate, through their calm demeanor and competence, that they can handle it responsibly and with restraint. The tough guy proves the precise opposite. Every emotional outburst screams poor self-control. Every aggressive interaction demonstrates utter unreliability. Every intimidating behavior shows that he prioritizes his fragile ego above mission-critical results. And there is something even more damaging than losing credibility. Once you are irreversibly labeled as the difficult person, the hothead, or the problem employee, that toxic reputation follows you across every professional boundary. References get meticulously checked, networks get quietly consulted, and the dark stories get shared. Your tough guy reputation becomes your absolute career ceiling. And the most painful irony is that the people who eventually surpass you are often the quiet, strategic individuals you dismissed as weak, precisely because they chose diplomacy over dominance, strategy over knee-jerk aggression, and lasting influence over short-term intimidation. This brings us to the ultimate heartbreaking truth. Everyone sees what you appear to be, but few actually experience what you really are. Machiavelli posited that the constant performance of strength nearly always masks the underlying reality of profound weakness. And nowhere is this more painfully obvious than with people who feel an absolute compulsion to constantly act tough. Here is the immutable psychological truth. Secure people do not need to prove their security. Confident people do not need to advertise their confidence. Genuinely strong people do not need to demonstrate their strength constantly. The very act of perpetually acting tough instantly reveals what you are desperately trying to hide, that you do not inherently feel tough, that you are not naturally confident, and that you are desperately compensating for a perceived deficit you believe you lack. And everyone can sense this performance. In the same way you can instantly spot a fake laugh, people can effortlessly detect fake, manufactured confidence. The same way you can feel when someone is trying too hard, others can feel your internal desperation to appear strong. Machiavelli called this the appearance of virtue without the substance, looking the part without actually being the part, performing the role without possessing the foundational skills, projecting a powerful image that your actual emotional and intellectual capacity cannot reliably support. This is where the trap becomes truly dangerous. When you base your entire identity on a volatile performance, you become a psychological hostage to the constant maintenance of that performance. You cannot show vulnerability without feeling that you are fatally breaking character. You cannot ask for assistance without feeling that you are admitting terminal weakness. You cannot strategically back down without feeling that you are losing all face and legitimacy. This creates the imposter trap. So, you are trapped playing a rigid role that does not fit you, maintaining an image that is emotionally exhausting, and living up to a reputation that severely limits your strategic flexibility. Meanwhile, genuinely strong and confident people operate under entirely different, healthier principles. They do not need to prove anything to anyone. They are comfortable showing measured vulnerability when it is appropriate for the relationship or goal. They ask for help when they strategically need it. They back down or pivot when stepping away serves their larger long-term goals. This is the meaning behind Machiavelli's advice about the lion and the fox. A prince ought to be both a fox and a lion. The lion cannot defend himself against snares and traps. The fox cannot defend himself against wolves. The tough guy, sadly, only knows how to be the lion. All raw, clumsy force, zero finesse. All blunt aggression, no strategy. All loud intimidation, no subtle influence. And in a world that consistently rewards adaptability and intellectual agility, this inflexibility becomes a critical, fatal weakness. The tough guy is unable to adjust his approach when aggression fails. He cannot switch tactics when intimidation proves counterproductive. He cannot pivot strategies when force becomes actively counterproductive. So what does he do? He escalates instead of adapting. He gets louder when he should get quieter. He gets more aggressive when he should get more strategic. He emotionally doubles down on the precise approach that is not working, instead of intelligently trying what might. And this is the exact moment the real predators strike, because they have been patiently watching. They have meticulously learned his patterns. They have precisely identified his weaknesses, and they know exactly when and how to exploit them with maximum strategic effect. Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, for everyone can see and few can feel. Machiavelli profoundly understood that people make crucial decisions about you based on what they observe, not what you intend. And what they observe when you consistently act tough is not strength. It is volatility and dangerous instability. Here is the inevitable consequence for people who consistently choose the path of performance. They gradually become isolated, not just socially, but professionally, emotionally, and strategically. Because here is the brutal truth most people will never tell a tough guy. They are simply exhausting to be around. Every single conversation becomes a potential conflict. Every interaction demands emotional armor. Every relationship feels like a draining negotiation with a hostile, unpredictable party. Genuinely strong, stable people actively avoid this draining energy. They do not have the time or patience for constant emotional management. They do not want to walk on painful eggshells. They do not need the unnecessary drama that inevitably comes with befriending someone who views every interaction as a personal test of dominance. So who is left sticking around the tough guy? Users, manipulators, and the weak. Those who secretly benefit from his aggression. Those who can subtly redirect his anger toward their own enemies. And people who are weak themselves but feel temporarily stronger by association with someone who merely appears powerful. But none of these individuals possess true loyalty. They are there for what they can extract, never for who you are. They will abandon you instantly the moment your unpredictable toughness becomes a liability. They will distance themselves the moment your toxic reputation becomes a threat to their own standing. Machiavelli offered a chilling warning about this. Men who can be genuinely useful to a prince are rare. Those who merely appear useful are tragically common. The tough guy inevitably attracts people who appear useful, but immediately disappear when real loyalty is demanded, when real support is required, or when real friendship would make a critical difference. And the isolation only deepens over time, because maintaining the tough guy act requires agonizing, constant vigilance. You can never truly relax. You can never afford to be vulnerable. You cannot show doubt, fear, or uncertainty without feeling that you are utterly shattering your persona. This creates what psychologists call emotional isolation. Even when you are physically surrounded by people, you are fundamentally, tragically alone, because nobody knows the real you. They only know the performance. And this isolation has devastating practical consequences. You don't get invited to the most important, critical conversations because people genuinely worry about your emotional reaction. You are not included in strategic planning because people cannot reliably predict your volatile response. You are not offered key opportunities because people fundamentally question your judgment and stability. Meanwhile, the strategic, quiet people you dismissed as weak are diligently building powerful, durable networks. They are creating long-term alliances. They are developing reciprocal relationships. They are establishing deep, unshakable trust with the people who actually matter. Because Machiavelli knew the most fundamental truth about real power. It is not about what you can aggressively do to people. It is about what people will willingly do for you. It is not about who superficially fears you. It is about who profoundly trusts you. It is not about who you can temporarily intimidate. It is about who you can sustainably influence. And influence demands genuine relationship, which requires measured vulnerability, which requires authenticity, which demands the terrifying courage to drop the tough guy act, and finally allow people to see who you actually are. But for many entrenched tough guys, this feels psychologically impossible. They have been performing strength for so long that they have entirely forgotten what genuine, restful strength feels like. They have been acting confident for so long that they have lost all touch with real, internal confidence. Love and fear can hardly exist together. If we must choose between them, it is far safer to be feared than loved. This is Machiavelli's most famous quote, and it is also his most profoundly misunderstood. People mistakenly interpret it to mean you should be scary, aggressive, or loud. But that interpretation is exactly wrong. Machiavelli was never talking about generating fear through raw aggression. He was talking about generating fear through proven, undeniable competence. Not fear of your temper, but fear of your capabilities. Not fear of your anger, but fear of the severe consequences of opposing your strategic moves. There is a massive, life-altering difference. When people fear your aggression, they will either actively avoid you or meticulously plot against you. When people fear your competence, they respect you and desperately want to work with you. Think about the people you genuinely, deeply respect. It is never the loudest, most frantic person in the room. It is the person who speaks quietly, but everyone instantly silences themselves to listen. It is the individual who never needs to prove a thing, because their track record and consistent results speak for themselves. This is what Machiavelli called the appearance of necessity, when your unique value is so obvious and indispensable that opposing you seems utterly foolish, when your deep competence is so established that challenging you seems strategically counterproductive, when your track record is so unassailable that betting against you seems unwise. But this profound kind of power takes consistent time and patience to build. It requires consistent, quiet performance, rather than consistent, loud performances of toughness. It demands actual, measurable results, rather than theatrical, volatile displays. It necessitates genuine internal confidence rather than cheap, manufactured bluster. And here is the beautiful irony. The people who focus religiously on being valuable naturally become powerful. The people who desperately focus on appearing powerful inevitably become vulnerable. Real power is always about options and leverage. When people desperately need what you can reliably provide, you have leverage. When people respect what you can consistently accomplish, you have influence. When people trust your judgment and consistency, you have authority. None of this requires acting tough. In fact, acting tough actively prevents all of it, because tough guys focus relentlessly on short-term dominance instead of long-term value. They prioritize immediate, ego-driven respect over lasting, durable influence. They choose superficial fear over genuine trust. Machiavelli understood that sustainable, secure power comes from being truly indispensable, not irreplaceable through aggressive intimidation, but irreplaceable through strategic contribution. Not feared because you are dangerous to be around, but feared because losing you would be exponentially costly to the organization or the effort. This kind of power is actually far more secure. It is based entirely on what you can reliably do, not what you can hysterically threaten to do. It is grounded in your measurable capabilities, not your unpredictable willingness to escalate. It is built upon your intrinsic value, not your emotional volatility, which means you can confidently drop the entire tough guy act without losing any power. In fact, dropping the performance often dramatically increases your power because now people can actually work with you. They can trust you. They can rely on your stability. And this leads to the ultimate Machiavellian insight. The wise man does at once what the fool does last. The fool acts tough until he is forced by catastrophe to be strategic. The wise man is strategic from the beginning, which renders the need to act tough entirely unnecessary. Here is what changes when you stop performing strength and commit to developing it. You become more influential, not less. More profoundly respected, not less. More strategically powerful, not less. Because real strength never needs to announce itself with noise. It simply shows up. It appears in the quiet consistency of your decisions. It manifests in your unwavering composure. It is demonstrated relentlessly in your results. People feel genuine strength the way they feel genuine, calm confidence, not because you frantically tell them about it, but because they experience it in every interaction with you. Not because you prove it through aggressive dominance, but because you demonstrate it through self-possessed competence. And the genius of Machiavelli lay in knowing that lasting power is never about exclusively being the lion or the fox. It is about having the strategic wisdom to know precisely when to be which. Sometimes you must be direct and forcefully decisive. Other times, you must be subtle, patient, and strategically quiet. But the tough guy only possesses one single tool: aggression. Therefore, every single problem looks like something that needs to be intimidated. Every single challenge seems like something that needs to be dominated. Every single relationship feels like something that needs to be controlled through force. The strategically minded person possesses a vast array of tools: influence when appropriate, force when strictly necessary, diplomacy when useful, pressure when effective. This profound strategic flexibility is what makes them genuinely formidable, not because they are loud and aggressive, but because they are strategically unpredictable. Not because they threaten with noise, but because they reliably deliver with precision. And here is the final compelling irony. The people who permanently stop trying to look tough often become the most formidable forces in any environment because they have finally learned to be strategic instead of reactive, purposeful instead of emotional, effective instead of merely dramatic. They have internalized Machiavelli's greatest quiet lesson. That power is a meticulous game of chess, not a wild, drunken boxing match. That influence is about quietly moving pieces, not loudly throwing punches. That real strength is about achieving complex objectives, not about winning trivial confrontations. So the truly vital question is not, how can I look stronger? Maybe it is, how can I become more strategically valuable? Maybe it is, how can I build genuine, deep-seated confidence? Maybe it is, how can I cultivate real, lasting influence? The smartest thing you can ever do is not learning to act tougher. It is learning to be more strategic, more competent, more indispensable, and ultimately, more valuable. Because when you become someone people truly need rather than someone people merely fear, when you become someone people profoundly respect rather than someone people actively avoid, when you become someone people implicitly trust rather than someone people merely tolerate, that is when you finally discover what real, unshakable power feels like. And it requires no performance of toughness whatsoever. In fact, it requires the precise opposite: the confidence to be utterly authentic, the strength to be vulnerable when appropriate, and the profound wisdom to recognize that the most powerful people in any room are, almost without exception, the quietest ones. Machiavelli articulated this truth over 500 years ago. The question for all of us is simply this: how long will it take you to learn what he already knew? I must know right now, what city are you watching this from? We are building a global community of people who seek quiet, strategic power, and your voice matters. I know this perspective changes how you think about strength and conflict. You deserve to embrace this wisdom. So, right now, type the following phrase in the comments below: silence is the highest strategy. Lock that phrase into the comments and claim this powerful idea. You understand the value of this information, and the best way to ensure you keep receiving this rare, strategic knowledge is to subscribe to this channel and immediately like this video. Do not let this powerful understanding simply vanish into the algorithm. Lock in your place now. In the next part, we will discuss the philosophy that transcends Machiavelli, the Stoic truth of Marcus Aurelius, and reveal the 4 precise ways that silence shields your peace, guarantees your focus, and makes you fundamentally untouchable. This is the crucial next step in mastering your own internal state, and you must not miss it. Imagine the moment the curtain falls, not on a play, but on a performance you have maintained for years. The moment when the bluff is called, the volume is dismissed, and the aggression meets genuine, quiet capability that simply refuses to escalate. This is the catastrophic silence that follows the roar of the tough guy. It is the moment they realize they spent all their energy convincing others of their strength, only to have none left to actually use when needed. The tough guy operates at maximum volume, maximum visibility, and maximum vulnerability. They are the lighthouse, drawing the attention of every ship, including the pirates and the storms. They believe they are demonstrating authority. They are merely advertising their coordinates. And before we dive deeper into the final, defining mistake of this performance, tell me the city you are watching this from. Knowing where this message is resonating confirms that the hunger for true, quiet power is universal, transcending every geographical boundary. We must now return to Machiavelli's most notorious statement, the one twisted into a justification for petty tyranny. It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. This phrase is the ultimate weapon of the tough guy, yet they misunderstand it entirely. They read feared and immediately equate it with intimidation, with a volatile temper, with the threat of physical or verbal aggression. They confuse being feared for your instability with being feared for your capability. Machiavelli was not advocating for temper tantrums. He was describing strategic deterrence. He was speaking of a fear that derives from consistent, undeniable competence, a fear that opposing you is not merely uncomfortable but unwise, even ruinous. When people fear your aggression, they plot. They wait for your downfall, they document your mistakes, and they actively seek opportunities to neutralize you, often through passive resistance or bureaucratic maneuvering. They fear your anger. But when people fear your competence, they calculate. They respect your ability. They seek alliances, and they understand that challenging you is a high-stakes endeavor that likely will not succeed. They fear your consequences. The tough guy demands fear by screaming. The powerful person earns fear by delivering predictable, devastating results when necessary, all while remaining calm. The modern tough guy wants to be feared for his readiness to fight a co-worker over a parking spot. The Machiavellian strategist wants to be feared for their ability to dismantle an entire career with a single, documented, legally sound decision, made quietly behind closed doors. This is the difference between a flash fire and an implacable glacier. One makes noise and quickly burns out. The other moves slowly, silently, and reshapes the entire landscape. This inability to distinguish between performance and capability leads directly to the ultimate failure: isolation. The performance of toughness, of constant dominance, is emotionally exhausting for everyone involved. People do not want to constantly manage someone else's ego. They do not want to walk on conversational eggshells, anticipating the next emotional explosion or forced display of machismo. So strong people, valuable people, the ones who actually possess networks and resources, naturally distance themselves. They choose peaceful, productive collaborations over volatile, high-maintenance associations. Who then remains in the orbit of the tough guy? We find the users, the flatterers, the sycophants, and the weak. These are the people who attach themselves to the illusion of strength, hoping to gain protection or leverage the tough guy's aggression against their own enemies. They are the temporary allies that Machiavelli warned against, those who appear useful, but possess no genuine loyalty. They are functional only when the tough guy is winning, and they are the very first to scatter when the liability arises. When the reputation turns toxic, when the HR investigation lands, when the legal trouble begins, the tough guy finds himself suddenly and profoundly alone, surrounded by the silence of abandoned relationships. The people who mattered, the ones who could have provided insight, intervention, or defense, already walked away, tired of the perpetual drama. The tough guy is often baffled by this isolation. He confuses submission with respect and compliance with loyalty. He cannot understand why he is excluded from the crucial strategic conversations, the important golf outings, or the spontaneous post-work collaborations where true influence is exchanged. The truth is simple. People who are strategic avoid people who are unpredictable. Power requires trust, and trust requires reliability. The tough guy is definitionally unreliable because his actions are dictated by momentary emotion, not long-term strategy. He prioritizes feeling strong now over achieving the objective later. Consequently, the most valuable currency in any organization, information, opportunity, and access, is rooted around him, flowing instead to the quiet, reliable operators who prioritize results over ego. This strategic blindness is the hallmark of the lion without the fox. Machiavelli insisted that a leader must be both. The lion possesses the strength to fight, but the fox possesses the cunning to avoid traps. The tough guy, having committed entirely to the role of the lion, has forgotten how to be subtle. He can only charge. When the situation requires diplomacy, he resorts to bullying. When it requires negotiation, he resorts to threats. When it requires patience, he demands immediate submission. This inflexibility is a fatal flaw in a world where power is derived less from brute force and more from informational asymmetry and psychological manipulation. His singular tool, aggression, works beautifully against weak opponents, but renders him utterly predictable to his truly dangerous rivals. The real predators, those who understand the Machiavellian game, simply construct a trap, allow the lion to charge noisily into it, and then dismantle him while he struggles. The final devastating revelation for the tough guy is the impotence of intimidation in the face of documentation. In the contemporary world, marked by surveillance, digital records, and hypervigilance regarding conduct, every aggressive outburst becomes evidence. Every loud confrontation is a witness statement. Every threatening email is a smoking gun. The tough guy operates with the mentality of a 16th century warlord in a 21st century compliance meeting. He creates a paper trail, or rather a digital trail of his own downfall. This realization is the climax of his tragic arc. The performance of strength, which began as a defense mechanism, becomes the active instrument of his destruction. His insistence on dominance ensures that when he finally fails, his failure is public, documented, and irreversible. His reputation, once built on the shaky foundation of intimidation, collapses into toxicity. The people who once appeared to fear him now actively work against him, armed with the evidence he so carelessly provided. His greatest weapon, his aggression, is transformed into his greatest vulnerability. True, lasting power, the kind that endures beyond a single confrontation, is not about volume. It is about value. It is not about confrontation. It is about contribution. The strategic person understands that the fastest way to become indispensable is to master a skill, build profound competence, and solve problems others cannot. When you become the person who holds the key, who commands unique capabilities, the entire dynamic shifts. You no longer need to intimidate because people need you. They align with you because it is strategically advantageous. They respect you because your results speak louder than any threat ever could. This is the ultimate Machiavellian insight. Sustainable power stems from being so valuable that opposing you, dismissing you, or losing you would be costly. Not because you would retaliate violently, but because the loss of your capability would create an insurmountable void. This kind of influence allows you to move quietly, to select your battles carefully, and to remain strategic when others are reacting emotionally. You drop the tough guy act, not out of weakness, but because you have developed a superior, quieter form of strength. When you abandon the performance of strength and focus entirely on developing genuine strategic competence, you become the calmest person in the room. Your strength is no longer a desperate broadcast, but a silent, underlying certainty. You achieve influence because you can be trusted. You achieve power because you are reliable. You achieve respect because you deliver results consistently. The fool acts tough until circumstances force him to be strategic. The wise man is strategic from the very beginning, making the need to act tough entirely obsolete. Real power does not need to announce itself. It simply manifests in the consistency of your decisions, the loyalty of your genuine allies, and the quality of your undeniable results. This journey demands a shift in focus, an understanding that vulnerability, when chosen strategically, is a greater source of connection than forced aggression. It requires the confidence to be authentic, the strength to be quiet, and the wisdom to know that the most formidable individuals in any setting are often the ones who are listening, observing, and calculating, while everyone else is still talking. We now reach the point of application. You understand the cost of the performance and the reward of quiet strategy. To solidify this commitment right now, I want you to comment below with this phrase: I choose strategy over noise. Typing that phrase is an affirmation of your decision to build real, quiet strength. Affirm your commitment to genuine power by tapping that like button, confirming this path aligns with your ambition. And if you are ready to continue acquiring the deep strategic knowledge that separates the few from the many, subscribe now. You secure your position in this community dedicated to genuine competence and strategic excellence. Do not miss the next deep dive, where we uncover the strategic necessity of sometimes appearing weak to achieve maximum influence. The next level of strategic understanding is waiting, and we begin immediately.